Let's talk about why law firms hire non-attorney salespeople. Now, first and foremost, this is not a video to debunk whether you believe in or should use non-attorney salespeople. I know a lot of the attorneys we meet with are still a bit skeptical to the idea of using a non-attorney salesperson. And I'm going to do a whole different video series walking through that because, to be clear, fully understand the skepticism and why it exists, but would also like to show you a path in which a non-attorney salesperson can step inside a law firm and run initial consultations for you and do so very well without ever towing that line of legal advice. But why do law firms end up hiring a non-attorney salesperson? And it's usually one of two reasons, assuming that firm has never hired a non-attorney salesperson before. The first reason is because they fundamentally recognize that they're not generating enough business with the consults they're currently taking. What do I mean by this? Maybe you're an attorney or a law firm owner listening to this and you have a steady stream of consults on your calendar every week, but you're struggling to turn enough of those into clients. And it's causing a bit of frustration for you because you'd like to grow the law firm. But the problem is you can't really grow the law firm until you turn more of those prospects into clients. So the number that we're talking about here is your close rate or your hire rate. And look, I understand a lot of law firms and attorneys we work with, they don't love sales or sales lingo. I get it. I'm not here to tell you to start using sales lingo. But if we look at that fundamental number, the number of qualified consultations that show up to a consult with you, and then the number of people that actually retain the firm, that's your close rate. And that close rate is a really important factor. So let me give you a baseline statistic. The close rate that we expect the law firms in our program to achieve is somewhere between 60 to 80%, depending on the practice area of law we're talking about. To be clear, that means 6 to 8 out of every 10 consultations we expect to turn into a paying client for that law firm. Now, when we first meet with a law firm, and you take an analysis of your current close rate, here's what we found to date. The average close rate when a law firm or an attorney is still taking consults. It's 33.7%. That's the average close rate we see across the board when we first meet with a law firm before they decide to either do any sort of training with their existing staff or get a non-attorney salesperson at some point. And that 33.7 is a number that allows you to still continue to grow, but it can be very difficult knowing that you've got an extra, call it 30 to 50% of your leads turn into appointments and show up that are just money burned. And that's one of the big things is law firms start to recognize that they're investing a lot of money in marketing and advertising, if you are investing in marketing or advertising, and yet only about 30 to 35% are actually closing into clients. And that becomes difficult to continue to sustain that growth because we're never getting ahead of it. So one of the fundamental primary reasons a non-attorney salesperson would be hired by a law firm is because the law firm owner has recognized that compared to where they could be from a close rate, they are not there and they'd like to be able to get there. And they get there through one of two ways. Either A, getting themselves sales training, or B, hiring a non-attorney salesperson to do it. Or there is an option C, which is hiring an attorney to run consults. Here's the problem with an attorney running consults that comes back to A, which is getting sales training themselves. Most attorneys don't like sales. They don't like to sell. They don't like being salesy. They don't want to come across as salesy. They don't like to think of it as closing a deal. And just to be clear, that is okay. But if you own a law firm, you also have to fundamentally step back. And although you may not individually like sales and actually performing the active sales, you do have to look at it as an essential part of your law firm. Because without adequately running a sales process and converting initial consultations into paying clients, you can't grow your law firm. So when I come back to options A and C of either the law firm owner themselves or the attorney, that fundamental lack of interest in sales makes it very difficult to invest in sales training for those people. It falls flat because at a core level, they don't really want to sell. So they're not very receptive to sales training, which comes back to then you've got to find someone who is willing to sell. Sell ethically, sell responsibly, sell without feeling like a salesy salesperson, but who can consistently convert initial consultations into paying clients. That's the first reason a law firm would start to look at and consider hiring a non-attorney salesperson. The second reason, and often the one that most law firms run into, is they've gotten to a point in their firm where they quite literally cannot grow any more than they're currently at because of their own physical capacity. You only have so many hours in a week to run consultations, plus do the legal work, plus be a manager to the employees in your firm, plus continue to grow the law firm and the business development, and plus work on the marketing. So you only have so many hours to actually conduct initial consultations. And I think if you have an appointment setter or an intake person, many of them would probably tell you, right now you're taking 20 consults in a week, but if we had more capacity, we could book 40. We just can't book 40 right now because we don't have the space to book it. So what ends up happening is the law firm owner gets into a position where they want to grow the law firm, but they can't take more consults. And even if they did take more consults, now they don't have the time to do the legal work. So they're caught in this infinite loop of capacity. And it's a very frustrating loop because it's a loop where you probably work at the most amount of hours as a law firm owner. You've maxed out your consults. You're trying to take them wherever you've got space and time. You've got to fulfill the legal work on the ones that have closed. And you're trying to manage the court dates, the cases, the documents. You're trying to manage everything, but you quite literally can't grow any further past that. And the truth of the matter, and not everybody likes to hear this, is because you are the bottleneck. You can't grow past your own capacity. And then that usually starts a path for law firm owners thinking, is this always how life's going to be? Like, am I just going to be in a perpetual state of constantly working 12-hour days? And the answer is, it doesn't have to be. This is where you're faced with a choice as a law firm. But the only way that you get out of those 12-hour days is if you find someone else to run consultations for you. And this is where the idea of a non-attorney salesperson becomes very attractive to law firms. Why? Because you can now take someone where their sole function and purpose is to run consultations, which means you just instantly open the doors on the capacity of consults you have in a week. And their sole function is to ethically and responsibly run legal consultations and close at the highest rate possible for you, which is somewhere between 60 and 80%. You supercharge the growth of your firm. Sure, does this now mean you're going to have to manage the capacity on the actual workflow perspective? Of course it does. But one doesn't happen without the other. You're never going to have to increase the capacity on the workflow if you never even get the work in to begin with. So this phenomenon causes a law firm owner to stop and think about, how do I approach this? And the best way to approach it is thinking and considering using a non-attorney salesperson that can run consultations for you. They can do so ethically, responsibly, never giving legal advice, and close at 60 to 80%. Now, some of you listening to this might be, there's no way that's possible. How do they do that? What if this? What if that? I promise you, we've done it now with hundreds of law firms, hundreds of non-attorney salespeople over the last 5 years, and they've done these numbers. Those averages that I'm talking about aren't pulled out of thin air. Those are from raw data we have within the law firms that we work with. So anyway, I make this video because you might be at this point right now where you started to warm up to the idea of a non-attorney salesperson, but you're wondering, like, why and when do you hire a non-attorney salesperson? And those are usually the two core reasons when a law firm looks to make their first non-attorney salesperson hire. And I will tell you from internal members in our program, they will tell you single-handedly the best decision that they've made for their law firm is hiring a non-attorney salesperson, because they regained a huge portion of their life. Just think about it. How many hours in a week do you spend in initial consultations? I can almost guarantee you that number is considerably high. We found for a lot of law firms, it could be upwards of 15 to 20 hours of your week. Half of your 40-hour work week, if you're only working 40 hours, is spent during initial consultations. You can offload that, increase capacity, increase close rate, buy back your time, and start to build out your system so that way that's the first step in taking the next large step in the growth of your law firm. So if you would like to learn more about how to do that, we place and train non-attorney salespeople for law firms. We'd love to have the opportunity to have a conversation about what that looks like. You can let us know down below. You can click the link, but hope this was helpful. I am going to create another series kind of walking through the myths of non-attorney salespeople and why so many attorneys are very skeptical of them, to try to tackle some of that for you, because I fully understand that's a reality in this situation. So hope this helps.